Good day. Welcome to the Trendy Place. This is the Trend Podcast with Justin A. Williams. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We're here to bring you content from all across the spectrum. And today is no different as we have Jonathan Herman on. Jonathan is a technologist. He's also an award-winning, you could say, master of physics. He has many ventures as well. He's a partial owner of NYC-based mobile app ventures. And also he is someone who's led white label solutions for Johnson & Johnson, the $1 Billion Roundtable, World Boxing Council, and many, many others. He's also a top 10 CEO. So we have a great get today. I mean, we often have talked about business and we've talked about tech, but we really have not had anyone on the show that really you could say is just a great heavyweight in the space in the game. So we're really happy to have him on. Thank you, Jonathan, for coming on. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Justin. And I have never been referred to as a master of physics before. So I will take that introduction. I don't know if I can live up to it, but I appreciate it.
Well, that was my worst subject in school, physics.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I admire anybody who's good at it. Honestly, I mean,
right?
If you can get at least a B or above in physics in any level, that has my respect.
All right. Well, I'll take it then.
Sure. All right. So why don't we start off with just tell us a little bit about how you got into the kind of sports arena, but also the business arena. What motivated you as a kid to did you feel like when you were younger that you had to rise above circumstances? Did you feel like you were very well supported by a community of people when you went to the business space? Or was it one of those things where you felt a lot of kind of backlash as well?
Yeah, no, I would definitely have to say that that things were pretty supportive for me growing up. My mother made a very conscious decision to move from Boston, Massachusetts to Atlanta, Georgia, because of the strong legacy that it has in the civil rights movement. And there were at that time so many people, and still today, moving to Atlanta for a better life, so to speak, from some other parts of the country. And so I was indoctrinated right away into the legacy of the civil rights movement. I went to Martin Luther King Middle School. We went to the nonprofit center every year, learned the stories, the speeches, the whole thing, and really got a sense of it. The high school that I went to was a math and science academy, Mays Academy there. But that was named after the famous educator for Atlanta University. And so our kind of hallways throughout the school were filled with quotes, inspirational content. There were speakers that came, Ronald McNair, who was the first African-American astronaut. So many examples came through. And so I think for many of us and many of us who graduated from the Atlanta public schools at that time, went on to do some really great things. And I think it's because we all had the sense that it was an obligation. It wasn't really a choice. All these people had sacrificed before us, had paved the way, knocked down certain barriers. And it was like, you have to do something with your life. You got to go open some doors for someone else. So I think that was really sort of the underpinnings that helped me early on. As I said, I went to a math and science academy, so we were responsible for doing science projects each year, and that's where I placed second place in a national physics competition for an amphibious vehicle that I had designed. Was able to test at Georgia Tech University, even though I was still in high school. And so at that time, I really thought that I was going to become an engineer and design airplanes and spaceships and cool stuff like that. That's what I thought in the middle of high school.
Wow, that's an amazing origin story, as you could say. The confluence of the kind of civil rights legacy, but also the focus on education, I think is a really big and important thing. It's something we talk about on this podcast enough that I think sometimes in our community, when we look at our heroes, the people that we kind of ballyhoo around, that talk about around the water cooler. It's not enough about people who are scholars. It's not about enough people who are mathematicians and scientists. When I think it was Unseen Heroes, or I forget the name of the movie, but it was about the 3 women who contributed to the Apollo missions.
Yes.
When I saw that, as an African American myself, I said, wow, we need to uplift more of these stories. And your story is obviously one of those. Did you find that the skills that you built as a high school scientist, but also as a lover of physics, did that translate into your initial starts in sports and entertainment? Were those skills applicable?
Well, it did. I mean, there was a little bit of transition in between. My mother was also an entrepreneur. She was the type of person who was always starting different businesses. And so right by the end of high school, I realized that I did not want to sit behind a desk and make designs all day, that I really wanted to do something that would be a little bit more social, that would allow me to set kind of larger goals and to achieve that in the context of, being a part of a team and hopefully eventually leading a team. And so that really moved me towards business by the end of high school. I went to Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, studied business there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that's where I sort of got my first introduction to the sports side of business. I was doing marketing for our collegiate basketball program, which was fairly highly rated at that time. The program has continued to advance. But I was doing basic, marketing research and studies there with the athletic director at Xavier. And so that was sort of my first introduction to sports. Came out, helped my mother with her business, also worked with Sandra Chim-DaCosta at first Columbia Records and then GRP Records, which was also very much a part of my development and my understanding of kind of entertainment as well. Had the opportunity to go to law school, studied sports and entertainment law and contracts. And then after law school, we started what was one of the first concepts to bring entertainment online. At that point, I felt like I understood entertainment contracts. I understood sports contracts, both through those experiences and through my law school training. And so we attempted, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here. This is 1998. We attempted to be one of the first companies to bring entertainment sales online. Now, mind you, at the time, we were all still buying records in stores at the time. And there was no...
Then Napster came.
Exactly. There was no such thing as digital distribution. Well, when I was at Northeastern University Law School, the founder of Napster was actually on the same campus as me at that time.
Oh, wow.
And was really helping change the perspective of how people thought about this. And what we realized, and I wasn't alone, Puff Daddy actually had a company of his own. Russell Simmons had a company of his own. We partnered with Public Enemy, that internationally known hip hop group that also
one of the best to do it.
One of the best. I've always been a fan. But they also had the #1 rated internet radio station in the country, according to Yahoo. So we partnered together. We went for a $10 million seed capital investment from some VCs out in San Francisco with perfect timing because the dot-com crash came just about a year or so after that. So I joke when I say perfect timing. Unfortunately, we were not able to raise the money. Our company went away. Those other companies went away. But Apple and iTunes did exactly what we all knew were coming. We could all see that wave and that transition that was coming. iTunes had the backing of Apple, which was pretty flush with cash at the time. There was no shortage of resources that they had. And of course, they had the hardware to go along with it. So iTunes did exactly what we all knew was coming, but we were not as fortunate and the timing was not so good for us. But that was sort of our first attempt in e-commerce and our own technology venture.
Yeah, so you must really have a lot of memories and stories about how to pivot from a situation that doesn't go the way you want it to.
Yeah.
For our audience, how did you do that? I mean, what came next, and what did you learn from the experience of kind of, you start something and you're thinking this is going to be something that's really innovative and big, and then you kind of see somebody else kind of take that baton. That's not easy, right?
It's painful. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I think for any entrepreneur who has a vision of something that they want to achieve and they are maybe fortunate enough to read the tea leaves correctly and see something coming that eventually does come into existence. When you see someone else able to seize upon that opportunity where you were not, that hurts. It's not easy, but that's really part of being an entrepreneur. And one of I think the ethics within this space, and sometimes you'll hear it spoken by others, is to fail fast, right? There's nothing wrong with failure. We fail all the time. And no matter what profession you are outside of entrepreneurship or anything else, we're all going to have failures. But when you fail, learn from those failures and understand what you have to do and make that pivot. So, for us, we were not able to execute on our initial vision, but we wound up morphing our company into a digital marketing agency. So we began working with Strickland and Ash, which was a pretty large sports and entertainment agency at the time. They had about 30 NFL and NBA players. We began working with them to design some of the very first websites for professional athletes and entertainers. And that's how we began working with Allen Houston. Allen Houston was captain of the New York Knicks, two-time NBA All-Star.
My favorite player when I was growing up.
Yeah, great person as well. And we did Allen's first fan website where we, took his brand and put some promotional components to it and built out an online presence for Allen and a way to engage his fans directly through the internet. This was one of the first websites to do that, and we began doing that for others as well. So we sort of took that knowledge that we had, that blueprint for how to build a website and what it is to market talent behind a website, and we began to apply that for athletes and entertainers.
If only you had Instagram or TikTok back then, right? I mean,
yeah, didn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, you really are a pioneer in the space of branding influencers. I mean, that's really what it, in some ways it is that you have I don't mean influencer, and some people think it's like a cheap term. I don't think it is. I think it's a very, very valuable term that really describes exactly what's happening. Yeah. And I think that with someone like back when you were working with Alan, to really say to yourself that there's no precedent for this, right? We have a history since maybe around the 1920s with some of the first minstrel show actors. And then we have, after that, we have, the rise of the pop star, Bobby Darin, and then the doo-wop singers. And then obviously so forth, the rise of somebody being kind of a pop sensation, a pop culture sensation. Yeah. But in the athlete space, that still wasn't developed when you were trying to develop that. Yeah. So it's like your genius really needed other kind of genius around it to really maximize it.
Well, yeah. And again, there was a sort of a community, I would say a small community of people who understood this and who began to kind of build out this space. And at the time, social influencer has changed, right? The power is not necessarily exclusively in the hands of an athlete or entertainer as it was back then, right? You had to already have fame, from your profession to be successful in the digital realm before. Now it's changed a lot, right? And everyone can really become an influencer to some degree. And maybe we have a little, too many folks who aspire to do that, right? And that maybe has become a little bit of a problem in and of itself, some folks, younger people who think that, you don't really need to have any skills. You don't really need to have an education, that as long as my follows or my likes are enough, then I can make money from that. And, I think that's not a healthy way to think either. But yes, we were, early on in that phase.
Yeah, I think your comment is 100% correct. And I see this all the time amongst Gen Zers and millennials. It's this notion that I have a platform and it, to me, must be permanent, right? I have a million followers or this or that. And you think that's always going to stay that way. But anybody who's been a celebrity or been in any kind of the influencing game can tell you that your fan base can drop like that.
That's right.
And if the app decides to let you go, then you're done. There was this thing called Vine, and Vine had all these stars, and a lot of those Vine stars, where are they now? They couldn't transition to TV. They couldn't transition to music or to Instagram or TikTok. So, that's why I think, as people of color, I mean, what we really need to do is have more of our own spaces that are open to everybody, but are created by us. I had a guest on, Lisa Coleman, and she was talking about how she really wants to see a lot of Black entrepreneurs have businesses that are for the general population, right? A lot of our businesses have Black behind it in the name or in the kind of mantra. And what I see about what you've tried to do, what you've done in your career, and also, moving now, we can talk about more about like tech and Web3, is when we enter that space, are we going to enter it and say, okay, we are going to be of one audience and have that niche? Or is it now time for us as people of business to say, it's really the profit that has got to matter, right? It's the overall dominion of the technology, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that point. The point is really well taken. We have to think beyond our community for sure, right? There are certain things that, there's been a lot of talk over the years of cultural appropriation, right? And how we see certain aspects of our culture, maybe being utilized by others and monetized by others, which, isn't always bad if it winds up empowering sort of a group of people where, we can all benefit from that, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. But certainly we have to think more globally at this point as far as what it is that we're doing. And if we have great ideas and we have great talent, that's going to cross boundaries of, gender, race, sexuality, whatever it is, right? We have to think a little bit more globally and broader at this point. One thing I'd like to say just before we sort of transition into Web3 and current technologies, just to complete or fill in this little gap as part of the story, is that when I began doing some of this work for Alan Houston, at a certain point, he asked me to work with him directly on both the for-profit and nonprofit side. But that quickly really became more of a focus for his nonprofit, for his philanthropic work. And so there was a period of years where some of the work that I was doing with Alan Houston became reputable enough that I was asked to also work with others in the space. And so not only did I run Alan Houston's foundation, I ran a program for David Robinson, who's in the NBA Hall of Fame. He had a Christian school in East San Antonio, Texas, that we supported with one of our programs. We did some work with Chris Paul, started a mentoring program for him while he was still in New Orleans. This is post-Katrina days. We did some work with Eva Longoria, also in San Antonio, and Russell Simmons as well. And so we were able to develop, with the support of major philanthropies through an organization called Living Cities, we were able to support some of the work that they were doing through what we called the Admiral Center at the time. So I sort of became known completely without intent, not intending to really carve out a niche for myself in philanthropy, but I became known as a celebrity philanthropy advisor, spoke on that topic for many years until I eventually decided it was time for me to go back and kind of build again in the technology space, which was always been my first passion.
Yeah. And did you make that transition because you wanted to build something a little bit more, I don't want to say that nonprofit's not tangible, but when you're inventing actual technologies, you don't always know where that's going to go.
Yeah.
I also work in the nonprofit space too, not with anyone that you may have heard of, but I what I love about it is that it's this kind of every day presents these new challenges. But if I was a scientist, I would say is that if I invent a actual technology that I can really innovate that in a way that is really equitable, but also general too, right? It's for the general public, but it's also creating different ladders in a different space, right?
Yeah. Well, Alan Houston's, I guess, biggest motivation around our philanthropy at that time was about responsible fatherhood. And we were able to build out programs across the country that served and strengthened relationships between fathers and their children. One of the things that I brought to the table when I ran his foundation was an entrepreneurship program. Again, because that was near and dear to me, and I saw the opportunity for community empowerment through entrepreneurship. So we did that program together, and we helped train more than 100 entrepreneurs in Harlem and in Central City, New Orleans. And in the course of doing that, I think it kind of re-sparked that bug for me, right? You know, here I am helping young people develop business plans and strategies. And we were also able to help incubate some of those businesses through that program. But it really, made me feel like, I'm missing something for myself. This is something that I should also be doing. And I had that first go round in e-commerce. I was a little bit eager to get back to it. And so that really precipitated the transition.
That's wonderful. That's really cool to hear. I mean, I think that with Web3 and technology, and especially Web3, what's coming up, I'm kind of a novice in it. I do operate in the crypto space, but the Web3 kind of whole blockchain, everything and all its applications, what kind of inspired you to go specifically into that route? And then what are your plans in that route? How do you want to leave your legacy there?
So around the time that I was transitioning out of philanthropy advising, we did a real estate project down in Panama that did pretty well and paid out a 3x return on investment for the investors. And so we went back to Panama thinking, okay, we're going to do another real estate project. We'll find, an opportunity, somewhere in the country. And we thought that would be in the Bocas del Toro portion of Panama, and discovered that there was no e-commerce happening there, no meaningful e-commerce. Amazon was not serving that country. Neither was Walmart or any other of the major e-commerce companies, despite the fact that Panama has the strongest economy over the last 20 years of all of Latin America. Brazil has come up and down. Mexico has always been strong. There's been others kind of move, kind of vying, for growth, but largely because of the canal, which is essentially, the most expensive toll booth in the world, which is a major part of Panama's economy. It has become a real economic powerhouse in the region, with multinational companies basing their Latin American headquarters there. So we saw an opportunity to be the first company to provide a meaningful e-commerce platform, which we began building out in 2016, 2017, really slow growth until the pandemic came. And all of a sudden, folks who had never shopped online before and who simply did not trust putting a credit card onto a website and hoping that, whatever you paid for is going to show up at your door. Those people were forced to try e-commerce for the first time. So traffic to our website shot up. At the same time, obviously, we had some supply chain issues around the world, but Panama continues, again, because of its kind of strategic importance for international logistics. There's still, a fair amount of supply availability in that country. So we began building that out just as a kind of traditional e-commerce company, not necessarily Web3 related. But at this point, we are layering on some Web3 components to that because there is an opportunity to incorporate blockchain into some of the work that's happening there. Blockchain provides certain advantages, unique advantages that can support that work. And so we have now kind of morphed that enterprise also into a Web3 company. The other Web3 company that we started about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now, really, is called Baller Mixed Reality. And what we did with Baller Mixed Reality, and I'll kind of keep the story on this part short. So when we returned to the United States, we had lived in Panama for some years. I found a trove of autographed memorabilia that I had from my days working with NBA players. And I found a signed Kobe Bryant jersey in my storage unit. And I came home like really excited thinking, okay, I'm going to tell my wife I want to put this on my living room wall, and I'm going to be able to, prominently display it right there in the living room. And she said, no. She said, I don't want to see that Kobe Bryant jersey in my living room. You might love Kobe, but I don't necessarily want my house decorated that way, right? Yeah. So we understood that work was happening around augmented reality. We did a test to see, okay, can we convert this real world item into augmented reality? Understanding that Apple and Google and Meta and others are developing AR eyewear that looks just like regular glasses. I think Meta is partnered with Facebook. So with Ray-Ban. So you can imagine a normal looking pair of Ray-Ban glasses. And through these glasses, you'll be able to see augmented reality and digital enhancements to your everyday life experience. So I could walk in my house with these glasses on, and I can have it set up as a man cave if I want with all of my jerseys, right? So that became kind of an experiment that, then we figured, okay, well, how do we monetize this? And we learned about NFTs and the potential of NFTs to create scarcity around digital assets. So we didn't intend to be an NFT company, but we developed some expertise around mixed reality conversion, which is part of the metaverse. The metaverse is both augmented reality and virtual reality, and producing content that then is sold as limited edition NFTs. So that's our other Web3 company. Both of these companies sort of live under a parent entity called Strong Interactive. But this has really been our focus the last few years.
Wow. That's just very impressive to hear that you guys are in the augmented reality space as well as NFTs. I think for me, as someone who I consider myself a decent investor, I want to see something in the augmented reality space because I think that people just, my mom's a psychologist. Okay. And she tells me that people are always looking for the next big fantasy, right? They're always looking for the next big experience. I mean, when we discovered dinosaurs, what do? We put dinosaurs in movies. It's like, it's not enough just to have, Tupac playing. We got to have the hologram, right? So people want to move into a space where they've never experienced something before like that, but it's also very very personal and controlled, right? It's like if you want to put the glasses on, you put them on, you experience it. When you're done, you put them away. And I think that kind of asset is really something that's going to move the needle in the future. Because if you can make it convenient, right? Right. The problem with some of the big VR things is that they're huge, they're clunky, and you can't go oscillate out of seeing reality and then going into your own virtual.
Well, we all laugh when we see the guy who's stumbling around the living room who thinks he's actually on the football field, right? And he's like winds up breaking up all the furniture. No, we're really excited about augmented reality, and I think a lot of people don't. Number one, they don't understand that augmented reality is part of the metaverse. And when we talk about the growth of the metaverse and how the metaverse is going to really be the next iteration of the internet, that augmented reality is really a big part of that. But what I like about it is that it doesn't remove us from the real world, right? We don't want to just be sitting behind computers, with goggles on and not really in the real world and meeting people and socializing, right? I think a lot of people see that as maybe a scary possibility from the metaverse. But augmented reality allows us to stay in the real world and simply have digital enhancements to our real world experience. And so whether it's, collectibles like this that you can, enjoy in your home or take to a party, or think about how right now we all use Google Maps when we're moving around town and we want to figure out, okay, where are we going to eat right now? Well, with these glasses on, in real time, as you're walking down the street or in your car, you'll see that same Google Maps content. Wow. You'll get the ratings of a restaurant floating over the restaurant, and you can see how many stars it got and what kind of food it is. And this will be in real time, as you're moving about. There's, some of it can be a little scary, especially for, I think older folks tend to be more wary of these possibilities than younger folks.
Right.
But when we talk about meeting folks and exchanging business cards and those type of things, how easy that could be if someone is wearing, on their lapel a little code that is automatically recognized using these glasses, and you can connect with them on LinkedIn. Again, you can opt into these things if you want to. If you don't want to opt in, you don't have to. But I think it's going to change a lot of things. Think about the dating world and dating scene as well, right? I mean, that's not something I have to worry about, Justin. I don't know if you're single, if you're still.
I am.
But think about the convenience of that, right? You meet someone in a club, and one of the cool things about online dating is that it gives you a lot of information about that person right away, right? Are they a smoker? Like, their likes, their dislikes. You can kind of eliminate a lot of people, quickly. Well, imagine being able to do that in real time using these glasses. So it's really going to change the way that we experience the world, hopefully in a positive way. We definitely have to be mindful of the negative aspects of this. We have to think about, the kind of the dark side of what some of this could be. And I think that's one reason why it's important that we participate and that we be part of the process of determining what this is, because I can tell you it's not figured out yet. There are so many new businesses, and I'll be speaking at Miami NFT Week coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll also be a judge of the first American Metaverse Awards. These events are comprised of people just like me who have ideas for what Web3 can be and are trying to figure out how to bring it into reality, and very often finding people who are like-minded, who want to collaborate with them. But, when it comes back to disadvantaged communities, I think there's a real opportunity there, because for the first time, in my opinion, I feel that there's a more level playing field in Web3 than there has been in the past. The nature and the ethics behind the technology itself, right? A lot of people are into cryptocurrency because they don't necessarily want to depend on governments, right? The concept of decentralization means that we want to take power away from major corporations that have held power and maybe have been the gatekeepers in the past, right? So when you meet folks at these type of events and conferences, it's really more about kind of how we as up and coming entrepreneurs can empower each other, work on projects that are mutually beneficial. And very often the strongest ideas are the ones that win. It's more of a meritocracy in that respect. Sometimes, online, you don't even know what someone looks like, right? They're represented by an ape avatar or something like that, right?
Right.
So discrimination becomes a little bit different, because I think it really is about the quality of your ideas and your ability to implement those ideas. And so I think in that way, it's a great opportunity for traditionally disadvantaged business owners.
Wow. Well, I got to say, this has just been an amazing conversation. And I want to wrap up by asking you, as, your last question, if I was in high school right now and I heard this podcast and I said, I want to be just like Jonathan Herman, what steps can I take to get a career similar to yours, but in the context of what's going on now, right? Obviously, we're just coming out of a pandemic. There's a lot of people going into the tech space, so there's a lot more competition in some ways. Maybe the same skills that it took to be successful 20 years ago, maybe those skills are even more useful or maybe less useful. What would you tell to a young person in high school that says, this is the path I want to go on?
Well, there's a big conversation right now about education and whether or not education is worth it, right? I'm certainly not one for, going to a university that's going to leave you in debt for, 20, 30 years, which, by the way, I still am. I still have college debt at this point, right? So I think we all recognize that that's not necessarily a good thing. However, what you can get, what you can learn within education is still important, especially if you choose a field that, you don't have to have all the answers right now, right? No one knows exactly what they want to do. I thought I was going to be an aerospace engineer in high school, right? But if you have an idea, a general direction of what you want to do, then education is really an important part of that. At the same time that you're gaining that education is to also build your skill sets. And that was also a critical piece. So every summer I was doing an internship program. In law school, I went to a cooperative education program at Northeast University, which meant that we got credit for actually working in the space. It wasn't all about the classroom experience. We got credit towards our degree by going out and working in the field. And that was invaluable because you're taking what you're learning in the classroom and you're putting it to practice while you're still in a college environment, right? And that really helped me understand, again, sports and entertainment contracts, which is what I was doing at that time, which set me up to be able to have a nuance to it or have some ideas of how to make it better, how to fix some of the problems that I could see existed in the space, because not only am I getting an education, but I'm also getting real world experience. And then at a certain point, the light pops off and you say, here's a way that I can do something different that hasn't been done before, where I can contribute something new and special, and hopefully that other people see as valuable, whether it's consumers or investors or others. And then again, move into that and try things out. Understand that there are going to be some failures along the way, but don't be afraid to fail. Obviously, do your best not to, especially if other people's money is involved. But, it's part of the process, right? There's going to be things that we try that aren't always successful. But if we build upon those things and get better and continue to build our professional skills, apply those skills in the ways that we think are most important to us, then eventually we will have success.
Totally agree. And I think, with what you just said, it's very impactful and it's very emotional for me to really hear you talk. You sound just like how my dad did, years ago when he was talking to me about, what I should do in my career and how I should pivot, and accept that failure is really a teaching opportunity. It's really a teaching moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I got to say thank you to all our audience, the trenders. Thank you so much for paying attention. Remember, you can like, share, subscribe anywhere. Thank you for making us top 15% globally in shares. We really, really appreciate that. This is part of a family media company that we've had since 1988, first Black-owned media company in New York State. So we're very, very thankful for that. And I want to thank my guest today, Jonathan Herman. Jonathan, do you have any last words for our audience?
No, just go out and pick up a book or a podcast or something on blockchain. It really is important to, at the very least, understand the technology and know what's coming. But Justin, thanks for having me today. It's really good to be with you and have this conversation. And I look forward to seeing your success as you go.
Thank you so much. And trenders, thank you. And we'll see you next time.